We never say we have problems or negatives. We have advantages and we have challenges. That's how we dichotomize the things that we face. I'm struck actually by the similarities of of Mark's observations and mine, although I will put it in a slightly different context to a certain extent. And I suppose my solution is the same, because although I'm fairly optimistic about the opportunities for Brandeis University, I think the likelihood of the Israeli government covering my operating budget is pretty low. So, although if anyone is interested, the answer wasn't no on my part. It was merely that I didn't expect it to happen. I think that the changes that we've seen, not just over the past decades, but really almost over the last years, we've watched it happen in real time, have been quite stunning. And they've had something to do with the transfer of the possession of wealth and the creation of wealth, not just in North America, but around the world, and to a new generation that looks at philanthropy differently in many ways. But I think even before we get to that, there has also been an enormous proliferation of organizations, even within the Jewish community, so that even foundations or individuals who are highly philanthropic within the Jewish world and have allotted a certain very generous sum for their tzedakah budget, as it were, find that those dollars are now being sought after by many, many more organizations than was true decades ago. So in many ways, competition among Jewish organizations for even an expanding sum of dollars for charity have created a different climate in terms of a focus on where these dollars might go. In addition, and I think Mark is spot on when he talks about the additional proliferation out into the secular world, out into the non-Jewish world, where many of our donors are now part of a mainstream world and are able to be part philanthropically in a very significant way. In many ways, when we look at the raising rates of intermarriage in the United States, one of the factors that's rarely talked about, but maybe one of the most significant factors, is that as opposed to generations ago, the sheer numbers of non-Jews who were prepared to marry Jews. It may well be that generations ago, one of the reasons intermarriage rates was as low as it was the separation of the communities. So we are, to a certain extent in North America, and I think in other countries and continents as well, victims of our own success, in terms of having become such a part of the mainstream society that, again, those charitable dollars are now being sought not only by a greater number of Jewish organizations, but by a vastly greater number of organizations across the entire charitable environment. Now I'll add another factor as well, which is certainly true in the United States, and others in this room know better than I whether it's true in other countries as well, and that is an increasing withdrawal from the cultural world and the educational world by state and even the federal government. And so needs that are now felt in a much more acute way in the education sector, particularly in the research sector. University like Brandeis has a very prominent science research program, particularly in neuroscience, biochemistry, the life sciences, areas that are extremely significant in terms of research, but also extremely cost intensive. Traditionally, that has been a mixture of philanthropic dollars and state dollars, government dollars, that has allowed those programs to go forward. As the government withdraws more and more from those areas, you have greater demand, and as I said, now greater demand for even an expanding pot of charitable dollars, but a greater number of organizations and greater demand by those organizations, which has created a very difficult climate in many ways. Now, I would also then echo Mark's comments in terms of, well, actually, I'll go back to Moody's story of the shliach who now says he has to answer a lot more questions. I think the whole growth of what we could call venture philanthropy has very much changed the way in which the discussion goes forward of philanthropic dollars. Now, to a certain extent, this is not a bad thing. You have a more informed philanthropist, as it were, a more informed source of questions, and therefore it helps us sharpen some of the programs that we're looking at. But I think there is what the economists would call enormous market failure that is taking place, and that is, it is in no one's interest to support the core and the functions of institutions. Now I'll speak in a parochial way for a second about the university. Remember that a university like ours, which has a major mission connected with the Jewish world and with Israel, also has a general educational mission. And in the world of venture philanthropy, funding the core curriculum and funding the core of the institution rarely comes up on the agenda of any individuals. So you have what we could call a collective action problem, that the sum of all of the individual philanthropic decisions made by venture philanthropists will likely leave open many vitally important areas that used to be covered, again, either by the government, even for a private university, but particularly for state universities, or by philanthropists who felt that it was their obligation to give to the institution, as in the kind of conversation that used to take place generally with university presidents, something along these lines: I'm giving you these resources because I trust you and I trust the university. If I didn't, I wouldn't be giving this gift to begin with. So I'm not here to argue with you about exactly how it's going to be used. I'm going to ask questions. I want to know what your plans are, but ultimately it's based on trust, as opposed to an idea that says, we will fund this particular project. What it does create in us is an obligation to think very carefully about which projects one does and does not want to take on. At one very successful fundraising university, the Johns Hopkins University, their former head of development used to say, you haven't really earned your stripes as a fundraiser till you've turned down your first $1 million gift. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in the business of turning down $1 million gifts. But of course his point was that you cannot actually run the risk of, in order to get a certain kind of gift or donation from a certain kind of philanthropist, taking on a project that is not at the core of the institution. And I think this will continue to be a major challenge as well. Now, in terms of where one might look for solutions coming out of this, since I've dismissed the possibility to share in Mark's effort to find the largesse of the Israeli government to fund all of us, it seems to me that there are, in fact, opportunities for all of us to seek synergies with other organizations and then appeal to donors in that regard. I will tell you very quickly one specific example. We have entered into a very important and successful partnership with the University of Haifa in a science research area, largely because there was a donor who spends half his time in the States, half his time in Israel, very connected with Haifa University and with the life sciences. It's an area of computational biology and bioinformatics that is very important to us, but also important to Haifa. And as a result, we found a donor who likely would not have made this gift to either institution alone, but was particularly interested in making this gift to the two institutions together. So it may well be that the reaction to this will cause all of us to be more creative in working together. Similarly, it may turn out ultimately to be in the interest of philanthropists to cooperate as well and to be talking to each other to look for synergies, because otherwise these market failures that I described earlier are going to lead to big gaps in organizations that used to provide for a whole host of needs in the charitable world. And if we work instead on very focused projects, we will miss those needs. But by working collaboratively both on the donor side and on the side of the institutions, we may well be able to address that, and perhaps even in a more creative way than we had in prior generations. Thank you.